name is Monisha Ríos. I'm the founding director of Centro Solidario de Puerto Rico, the Solidarity Center of Puerto Rico. U.S. colonialism of Puerto Rico began even before the war in 1898. So if we go back to the Bolivarian Revolution, and a young U.S. empire had its interests already in the Southern Hemisphere with the creation of the Monroe Doctrine, which is the cornerstone of U.S. foreign policy, and what's known as the Spanish-American War that occurred in 1898 was one of the first major implementations of the Monroe Doctrine. And the U.S. had had its eye on the Spanish Empire's remaining colonies within the region. They had been watching the Bolivarian Revolution and the liberation of various countries in Latin America and throughout the region for a while, and waiting for the Spanish Empire to be weakened enough for the U.S. to step in and finish the job as the heroes. And so Puerto Rico was on the list of places to be liberated by the United States. But we know by the character of the United States that their goal was instead to take over the assets of the region that the Spanish had been controlling up until that point. And when I say asset, I mean military and resource. So Puerto Rico had always been strategically valuable in the military sense to the Spaniards because of how any competing imperial forces from Europe would have to enter the region through the Antilles. So this is a lot of the interest that the U.S. had. They had interest in the industries that were here, such as sugar, as well as other resources, including labor. So kind of all of those forces work together, which led to our current situation in Puerto Rico. And over time, there have been forced migrations through the colonial process. You have the U.S.'s version of racism and colorism kind of blending in with the Spanish version of that through the caste system that created the racial hierarchies that are embedded into the economic hierarchies that exist here. So you have all of that working together, and then you have the resources, including human resources, material resources, being taken from our land and funneled into the imperial core, just as occurs in other regions, including in our region here in the Caribbean. So our organization, like BAP, believes that there is no peace without justice. And peace for Puerto Rico, for Puerto Rico to be part of an actual zone of peace in our region, we need alternative institutions, because our government is controlled by the U.S. government, as well as our bourgeoisie, our Creole elite. And even if the U.S. were to leave tomorrow and we had all of a sudden free and independent Puerto Rico, we would still not be free, because we would still have the capitalist forces here working in tandem with the U.S., like happens in any other nation, that they become a proxy for the U.S.'s interest, for imperialism's interest. So for us, particularly the people in Vieques and Culebra, you can see Vieques off in the distance behind me. Vieques was militarized. Culebra was militarized first in 1901, Vieques later in the early 40s, 1940s, to help advance U.S. imperialism. The result of that is not only in the expulsion of our people from this land, it's contamination. For 60-ish years, the U.S. and NATO forces used Vieques as a practice range to test all sorts of weapons, chemical weapons, traditional ordnance, psychological weapons, all of it. And so there is an untold amount of unexploded ordnance still polluting the land and water in our, from Vieques to Culebra, from Vieques to here. We have all of the same problems that our friends in the United States have in terms of healthcare crises, in terms of those structures and institutions being designed to perpetuate capitalism and not actually serve the people. And then we have the added layer of colonialism, making that extra hard on us. So what we are attempting to do first is starting with health justice. So this house that we're sitting in now, the goal is to have it fixed up in such a way that we can accommodate people from Vieques and Culebra. There's no hospital in Vieques. There's no healthcare system in Vieques, really. There are some doctor's offices, and there's a makeshift clinic. And there are a lot of deaths that happen, and they're all preventable. And there's, in addition to that, there's a current healthcare crisis throughout Puerto Rico, where Puerto Ricans are consistently underpaid here from Medicare and health insurance companies, and we really don't have an infrastructure that's set up to support the needs of the people. So we're trying to create, as small as this is, a space that people from Vieques and Culebra can come when they have to access healthcare on the Big Island, especially to support maternal care. People have to travel a long distance. They have to take a ferry. Many of the people who are from there have cancer. If we can take over the buildings, existing buildings and plots of land that are here, we are working on building a community land trust, but one that will expand throughout all of Puerto Rico, not only be part of a particular neighborhood or a specific area in Puerto Rico. And with proper support from folks in the US and elsewhere who have really a responsibility to support Puerto Rico, particularly with reparations and struggling with us for independence, we will be able to get more buildings and more land to be able to create a health justice oriented network. So another idea that we have is to work more deeply with folks in Vieques about creating maternity care there. Whatever homes exist there, we can go and we can establish maybe a place for doulas to provide services, prenatal care, postnatal care, and all of those things. Additionally, we're looking at how to increase the climate resilience. We are a frontline community with climate change, and we do not have the option of not creating homes and strengthening really our ability to survive with dignity, because it's just going to get worse. And we cannot rely on our government, we cannot rely on the federal government to care about our lives. And so we have to create our own infrastructure. If we are able to develop a well-supported, a materially supported land trust initiative, then we can go ahead and purchase buildings. We can go ahead and purchase plots of land in a way that is part of the decolonization process. But then we can work with people to create the climate resilient structures, self-contained, able to withstand hurricane winds, able to withstand earthquakes and flooding. And in doing that, we also want to make sure that they are designed specifically for functional diversity, because we have a lot of people with a variety of mobility needs who are not supported on the day-to-day basis here. And much of the climate resilience architectural design is not inclusive, it's not accessible. So that's another goal, is to work with folks who are involved in climate resilient architectural design to make it accessible and affordable. So we would like to support working class struggle here in that way as well, by removing some of the barriers to healthy existence, removing some of the stress of I can't afford rent anywhere in Puerto Rico. I might have to leave to the US to go stay with family members, but I might have to leave behind an elder. there will be no one to take care of that elder. Like, these are very real concerns that a lot of families here have, and they have to make the very difficult choice of leaving, which then just creates a void that colonialism and imperialism steps into. Another structure that we're working on is to increase international solidarity, not only in our direction, but outward from here, because we are all going to be impacted by climate change in the same way that we are all impacted by capitalism and imperialism. And if we are not building strong relationships with each other, if we don't have places that we can do that and do it safely, it's going to be a lot more difficult. So going back to the like health justice piece, which is our starting place, because without our health we have nothing, and we cannot effectively resist the forces of militarism, colonialism, imperialism specific to our region without that. And if people can resolve a lot of the barriers to accessing care just by having a place to go and be safely to recover from illness or to receive treatment, that can actually do a lot. It also allows us the opportunity to build relationship with people who may not have any idea that these things are happening around them, and that is what is impacting their life. So we can do the political education at the same time that we're helping folks to heal. Additionally, because of our colonial status, in relationship to the way that economic warfare is used in our region, it's helpful for people to understand that colonialism is warfare, and that colonialism includes economic warfare. All of the concepts that make hybrid warfare are happening here. And so by undermining the existing systems and infrastructures that are currently in place that uphold militarism, colonialism, and imperialism in Puerto Rico, we are essentially breaking the legs out from underneath that table and using them to build our own table. Obviously, maybe for a lot of people, the first thought would be political independence. For me, however, my thought is again toward justice. It's toward how do we make the day-to-day life of Puerto Ricans dignified, just like we want for everyone everywhere, but specifically for us. I think cleaning up the unexploded ordinance from Vieques, having all of the countries who participated in creating the problem, throughout those 60 years, any country, even if now, particularly those in Latin America, including Venezuela, who practiced and left their toxic footprint here, they need to be involved in cleaning up and restoring our health here, restoring the health of our land and restoring the health of our people. That, to me, would be a very actionable act of solidarity, whether it is in helping us to have the resources to create the people's infrastructure while we are simultaneously struggling for independence, or if it's to, in addition to that, amplifying the day-to-day struggles of Puerto Ricans and not just doing symbolic statements, because that helps us in a political sense, but it doesn't help us in a material sense, and we need the material solidarity first, or simultaneously, and we need a lot of it because we are competing with Bitcoin, we are competing with crypto colonialism, we are competing with the new money, we are competing with the fact that the laws are made in Puerto Rico to benefit colonizers, including the dictatorial fiscal control board that was installed by President Obama. So we have all of these things, all of these forces that are working against us, and we're here oftentimes by ourselves, alone, without like hands-on, let me get in and dig with you and build with you and get dirty with you while you're fighting for your life, because that's what we're doing. So for Puerto Rico to be a part of a zone of peace in the Caribbean and Latin America, we would need to be demilitarized, and we would need to have real tangible support for rebuilding our lives. And I recognize that the same is true. Like, we also need to be giving that too. So having an opportunity to restore healthy relationships, not only to the land, but to one another, to our relatives all throughout the region, you know. And also, in my opinion, to me that looks like supporting the Black liberation struggle in the U.S. and supporting the struggle that indigenous people have to also be free and sovereign, because that is their land. So the zone of peace for Puerto Rico looks like a mutual love and respect for the uniqueness of each of our struggles and the universality of our collective struggle, and really working together for all of our liberation. But just don't leave us out. Don't forget that we're here. And just because we're part of the US, just because they have placed their brand on us without our consent, just because they rape us every day without our consent, doesn't mean that we want that. I feel like oftentimes there's a misconception from folks who don't necessarily think of Puerto Rico as being part of Latin America and the Caribbean, that we are the United States. Stop that. We are not part of the United States. We're prisoners of the United States. We are political prisoners of the United States. We're economic prisoners of the United States. We're military prisoners of the United States. And we want our liberation, and we're fighting for our liberation, and we need help to fight for our liberation.